The Bennington family had been looking for a dog for a few weeks before they came across Sammy, a retired police dog. They fell in love instantly, and before they knew it, Sammy was settled in their home. However, within the first week, Sammy began to act strangely around the attic hatch, continuously staring at it, growling, and even barking. The family soon realized the dog might be onto something, but none of them could have imagined what they would find up there. Sammy continued barking at the attic hatch for days, and at first, her owners thought it was just the howling of the wind that scared her. However, even after the storm passed, Sammy would not stop barking. They understood that they had no other choice but to go into the attic and see what was going on. They expected to find a mouse or a bird in there since they hadn't used the attic for years. However, when they finally climbed inside, it became clear that it was something much more serious. "Oh no, we have to call the police right now," they exclaimed, shocked by this unexpected discovery. As soon as the officers arrived, it became clear that there was going to be a police investigation. It appeared that Sammy had one last job before going into retirement. But why was Sammy barking so much? What did they find in the attic? And why did the police need to investigate it? But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. Joshua and Rebecca had always wanted to adopt a dog, and when the opportunity presented itself to adopt a retired police dog, they took it with both hands. Rebecca's grandfather was a police officer, and whenever she visited him at the police station, she got to play with some of the dogs they worked with. It was really a core memory for her, and because her grandfather had recently passed away, she saw this as a way to honor her memory of him. They immediately completed the adoption application and answered all kinds of questions about their living situation, their previous experience with dogs, and so on. Rebecca had worked at a doggy daycare, so she knew plenty about dogs and how to take care of them. So sure enough, they passed the first part of the adoption process and they were ready to plan a home visit. The visit went great, and the dog Sammy did not even pay any attention to the attic hatch at all. There was not a single weird thing about her behavior, and the adoption agency was quite happy with the visit. Sammy spent most of her time running around in the garden and playing with her potential new owner's son, Zeke, and afterward she fell asleep on the couch. A few weeks later, Rebecca and Joshua officially adopted Sammy, and she started her retirement with her new family. Sammy seemed to be enjoying her new lifestyle, and she did not have a lot of trouble adjusting to her new home. However, one day something strange. Joshua had been playing fetch with Sammy inside the house, and suddenly she just disappeared. He called her a couple of times and even shook her bowl with food to get her attention, but she still did not return to him. This was very odd because until then, Sammy had never ignored an order from any of them, not even little Zeke. So Joshua obviously needed to investigate. Joshua called out to Sammy again, and he suddenly heard her whining softly. He looked around, wondering where the sound was coming from, but he couldn't see her. And then he realized that she had gone upstairs, which surprised him even more. Sammy was not allowed to go to the first floor, and she knew this very well. However, now she had broken that rule and she was sitting in the middle of the upstairs hallway. She looked very tense and extremely focused on one single thing, the attic hatch. Joshua started laughing and said, "You silly dog. Don't be scared, that's just the wind. Come, let's go play again." Where's the ball? He thought Sammy was staring at the attic hatch because it was storming outside and the wind was blowing so hard that it made a howling sound. However, that was not what had caught Sammy's attention at all, but he would only find out the truth a couple of days later. Sammy stayed behind, but after a couple of minutes, she followed Joshua down the stairs. He thought that was it, and it was just a one-time experience, but he was wrong. The following days, even after the storm passed, they found Sammy staring at that same hatch several times. They hadn't opened that hatch in years, and they just assumed that she had heard a mouse walking around up there. However, one day, Sammy even started barking at the hatch. No matter what Joshua and Rebecca did, she wouldn't stop. They realized that there was only one thing they could do, and that was to go into the attic and find out what Sammy was barking at. He climbed up the wooden and shaky stairs, one creaking step at a time. When Joshua finally climbed high enough to take a look into the attic, he gasped at what he saw. "Honey," he called out to Rebecca. Rebecca ran upstairs and followed him onto the stairs and into the attic. And then they were both standing there, staring at the discovery. "We have to call the police," she whispered. Joshua looked at her and responded, "I know, but what should we tell them?" Rebecca sighed and said, "Well, the truth, obviously. What else can we do?" While Rebecca focused on Sammy, Joshua called the police. He listened to the ringing tone for a while until someone picked up the phone and said, "Hello, this is the Rosewood Police Department. How can I help you?" Joshua explained the situation, and he also made sure to mention that Sammy had actually made the discovery. The dispatcher told Joshua she would send Sammy's old handler, Officer Daniels, over to their house to check it out. Not much later, Officer Daniels arrived at their house. Sammy had already started whining and barking. Even before he even rang the doorbell, she must have recognized his scents. When Joshua finally let the officer inside, Sammy greeted him by jumping around him very excitedly, and she immediately pushed him towards the stairs, eager to show her old owner what she had found this time. Joshua showed the officer upstairs, and he opened the attic hatch again, pulling down the stairs for the second time in one day after not even having touched it in years. "It's up there," he said, gesturing to Officer Daniels that he could climb up first and he would follow him. "All right, let's take a look," the officer said as he climbed into the attic. As soon as he looked around the space, he said, "Well, Joshua, it's good that you called. This is serious, you see. One of the windows in the attic was broken. It could have happened because of the storm, of course, but there was one big reason why they all thought that someone else had done it on purpose. There was a big suitcase in the attic. Neither Rebecca nor Joshua had ever seen it before, and they thought that someone had broken into their attic to leave that suitcase there. But who? And why? That's what the police were going to find out." The morning sun cast a golden hue on the Rosewood Police Department as Officer Daniels carefully placed the mysterious suitcase into the evidence room. The weight of the case was palpable, not just in its physical heft but in the myriad questions it posed. Where did you come from? In the tech room, a bank of screens displayed footage from various neighborhood cameras. The storm from the previous night had distorted some of the footage. Every car, pedestrian, and stray cat was noted, time-stamped, and cross-referenced. "Then there has to be something here," murmured Officer Martinez, her eyes never leaving the screens. By midday, a team of officers, including Daniels, fanned out across the neighborhood. They knocked on doors, introduced themselves, and posed their questions. Now, most residents were helpful, trying to recall any odd events or unfamiliar faces. Mrs. Henderson, an elderly woman with sharp eyes, mentioned a strange noise late at night, but without more concrete evidence, it was just another piece of the puzzle. Days turned into nights and the leads grew cold. In the neighborhood's collective memory yielded no significant clues. As the days passed, everyone hoped for that one breakthrough that would shed light on the mystery. The sun was beginning its descent when a familiar knock echoed through Joshua and Rebecca's home. Opening the door, they were met with the stern yet comforting face of Officer Daniels. "Good evening," he greeted, his eyes briefly darting to Sammy, who wagged her tail in recognition. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, hinting at the gravity of his visit. Clearing his throat, Daniels began, "I know this might be an unusual request, but we're at a bit of a standstill with the case." He paused, glancing once more at Sammy, who sat attentively by Rebecca's side. "We were wondering if Sammy could assist us just one more time. Her skills might be the key to unlocking this mystery." His voice held a mix of hope and desperation. Joshua and Rebecca exchanged a hesitant glance. The thought of thrusting Sammy back into the world she had left behind was daunting. "If it'll help find answers," Rebecca began, her voice wavering, "then yes." Joshua nodded in agreement, placing a comforting hand on Sammy's head. They hoped this decision would lead to closure. The next morning, the family's driveway was graced by a familiar police car. As Officer Daniels stepped out, Sammy rushed to greet him, her joy evident. The bond between the two was unmistakable. With a nod from Joshua and Rebecca, Daniels attached a special harness to Sammy, signaling her role. Together, the duo prepared to delve back into the investigative world, hoping to bring peace to a family and a community on edge. The familiar hum of the police station greeted Sammy as she walked through its doors. In a quiet room, the mysterious suitcase lay on a table, its contents a puzzle waiting to be solved. Officer Daniels gestured for Sammy to approach. With a focused intensity, she sniffed the suitcase, her nostrils flaring. Each scent was a piece of information, a potential lead. With the scent locked in her memory, Sammy's posture shifted. She was no longer the relaxed family dog, but a detective with a mission. Leading Officer Daniels, she began her search, moving with purpose through the station and out into the streets. From a distance, Joshua, Rebecca, and a few officers trailed behind. The room's atmosphere was thick with anticipation. As the lid lifted, the contents were finally exposed to the waiting eyes, revealing a sight that no one had truly expected. Beneath the lid, neatly stacked bundles of cash lay in organized rows. But the sheer volume was staggering. Whispers filled the room as officers tried to estimate the value. This isn't just a small theft, the serial numbers on the bills were quickly cross-referenced. It didn't take long for the police to confirm their suspicions the money was stolen, but the origin remained elusive. But the urges then have her can. No recent bank heists or large-scale thefts had been reported in the area. The question hung heavily in the air: where had such a significant sum come from? Back at their home, Joshua and Rebecca sat in their living room, the weight of the day's events pressing down on them. When Officer Daniels relayed the discovery of the money, their faces registered shock and disbelief. That's why our attic, determined to regain a sense of safety, Joshua began researching home security systems. "We need to be proactive," he declared, scrolling through reviews of the latest security cameras. Rebecca nodded in agreement. "We can't let fear dictate our lives." Within days, cameras were installed at every entry point, their blinking lights a small beacon of hope in their quest for peace. Days turned into a blur of routines, punctuated by moments of anxiety. With the scent of the suitcase fresh in her nostrils, Sammy's demeanor shifted. Every fiber of her being was attuned to the task ahead. Her eyes, sharp and focused, scanned the surroundings, and with a determined gait, she began her pursuit. An Officer Daniels, tethered to her by a leash, marveled at her precision. The retired police dog was in her element, and the chase was on. The streets of the town unfurled before them as Sammy led the way. She darted down alleyways, paused at crossroads, and doubled back on herself more than once. As hours passed, a growing sense of déjà vu settled upon the group. The landmarks started to look familiar, the streets reminiscent of their earlier journey. "Isn't this Rebecca?" began, her voice trailing off as realization dawned. The path Sammy was taking was leading them back towards their own home. The closer they got to Joshua and Rebecca's house, the more the atmosphere grew tense. "Why would she lead us back here?" Joshua muttered, his brow furrowed. Officer Daniels, though trusting Sammy's instincts, couldn't help but feel a pang of suspicion. The final steps of their journey culminated at the very doorstep of the family's home. Sammy stopped, her nose pointed towards the entrance, her tail wagging slowly. Standing at the doorstep, Officer Daniels felt a whirlwind of emotions. The implications were grave. Could the family he had grown fond of be involved in this mystery? Taking a deep breath, Daniels turned to Joshua and Rebecca. "I need to know if there's anything you're not telling me," he began, his voice firm. The couple looked taken aback. "Why would we call the police if we were involved?" Rebecca retorted, her eyes flashing with indignation. Joshua, trying to keep the peace, added, "We're as confused as you are, officer. Your home was violated, and we're victims here too." Rebecca nodded in agreement, her arms wrapped protectively around Zeke, who watched the exchange with wide eyes. In the dim glow of their living room, Joshua and Rebecca huddled around their computer, accessing the feed from their newly installed security cameras. With bated breath, they began to review the recordings, hoping to find some clue that might shed light on the mystery. As they fast-forwarded through hours of footage, a particular segment caught their attention. A shadowy figure, barely discernible in the dim light, moved stealthily around their property. The intruder's face was obscured, making identification impossible, but their intent was clear: this was the person who had left the suitcase. With notepads in hand, Joshua and Rebecca began to piece together a timeline of the intruder's actions. The figure's movements were methodical, suggesting they were familiar with the property. Could it be someone we know? Rebecca pondered aloud. After hours of analysis, a bold idea began to form. What if we confront this person? Joshua suggested, determination evident in his voice. Rebecca hesitated. "It's risky, but we need answers." Yet they decided to set a trap, using the suitcase as bait. If the intruder returned, they would be ready. With a plan in place, they prepared for a confrontation that could change everything. Night fell, and the couple took their positions. As the intruder approached the suitcase, Joshua and Rebecca emerged from the shadows, their faces set with determination. "Minchrit, who are you?" "That do you want?" Joshua demanded, seeking the truth behind the enigma. As the dim light fell upon the intruder's face, Joshua and Rebecca gasped in disbelief. It was Michael, their seemingly unassuming neighbor. The realization hit them like a ton of bricks. "Michael!" Rebecca exclaimed, her voice a mix of shock and betrayal. With his secret exposed, Michael's shoulders slumped in defeat. "I never meant for any of this to happen," he began, his voice shaky. He explained the mounting debts, the pressure, and the opportunity that presented itself at work. Stealing the money had seemed like the only way out. "I thought hiding it in the attic would buy me some time," he admitted, regret evident in his eyes. As the story unfolded, one detail became clear: Michael had taken advantage of the shared roof structure to access the attic. "Kijisker, I knew you rarely used it," he confessed. It seemed like the perfect hiding spot. The interconnected attics, a quirk of the neighborhood's architecture, had facilitated his clandestine operation, allowing him to move the money without ever entering their home directly. Everything began to fall into place. Odd behavior Sammy had exhibited, her focus on the attic, her unease, it all made sense now. Facing the consequences of his actions, Michael's facade crumbled. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, tears forming in his eyes. "I never wanted to involve you or your family." The weight of his choices, the betrayal of trust, and the ripple effects of his actions were all too apparent. And as the police arrived to take him into custody, the neighborhood's tranquility was forever shattered by the revelation of a neighbor's regret. Whispers spread like wildfire through the neighborhood. Front porch conversations, usually filled with mundane chatter, were now dominated by the startling revelation about Michael. Local newspaper ran a front-page story titled "Retired Police Dog Cracks Unsuspected Case," detailing her instrumental role in uncovering the truth. Neighbors would stop by, offering treats and praises, lauding her keen instincts. The once working dog, now in her golden years, basked in the adulation, her tail wagging with pride. As the strain between Joshua, Rebecca, and Officer Daniels was palpable. However, recognizing the unique circumstances, they decided to meet over coffee. "We were all caught off guard," Daniels admitted, his voice softening. The trio shared their perspectives, understanding the pressures each faced. By the end of the conversation, the foundation for renewed trust was laid, with hope for a stronger bond in the future. With the mystery unraveled and peace restored, life began to find its rhythm again. Sammy, having had her moment back in the limelight, settled into the comforts of retirement. She'd spend her days lounging in the sun, playing with Zeke and enjoying long walks with her family. The bond between Sammy and her family grew even stronger, a testament to the love and trust they shared.